Sales of vinyl records in the U.S. have increased in each of the last 7 years, including a 30% jump in 2013. However, vinyl made up only 2% of overall U.S. album sales last year. Industry experts from around Boston weighed in on whether vinyl is really making a comeback or whether this is simply a trend doomed to fail. There are nearly 20 record stores that remain open in Greater Boston. Reed Lapeman is the co-owner of one of them, In Your Ear Records. He's been selling vinyl for over 30 years and says business is still good.
Back then, that was the main medium, and we were just selling records on the street. Things were a little more wide open. You could go to colleges, you could sell records, just in front of the colleges, and then that stopped being an option, and we decided that, hey, I guess we have to open up a store. So we just did. We never got out of the vinyl habit. We never bought into getting rid of all your vinyl and going all CD, which a lot of stores did. And so now we're benefiting a little bit from the comeback of vinyl.
Dan Toffling owns PrescribedVinyl.com. He's a software engineer by trade. Dan's record business is online only.
To survive, you can't just be an analog animal these days. There has to be some sort of hybrid. The biggest difference is I've really taken a DJ approach to the record store, where I sort of go out, vet the artists, and find the record labels that I'm really interested in. About 95% of it is independent record labels, so I'm looking to find sort of the small guy out there who's producing great music that people haven't heard. Vinyl is great, but there is practicality to it. The whole Spotify thing, music as a subscription, Pandora, those things are amazingly convenient. Sometimes you pick the songs that you want to have, but 9 times out of 10, you're just throwing it on and saying, play some music. Where for a record, you have to think, okay, I want to hear this now, let's go get that off the shelf, put it on the table, let it run through, that sort of thing. Very inconvenient, but at the same time, it's a much more blissful experience, I feel.
Jonathan Weiner is a sound engineer with over 20 years of experience working for artists like Aerosmith and Nirvana. He says vinyl is a unique and marketable way to connect with listeners, but analog recording has technical limits.
There are some constraints. The two big ones with vinyl are you can't push the level up too far. If you do, you end up sort of smashing the peaks of the signal, and so it just sounds ugly. The other thing is that with vinyl, there are 2 axes that the stylus reads in the groove. The horizontal axis that tracks the mono channel, which is usually where the bass lives. And then there's the up and down axis, which is the stereo information. And if you have too much bass energy in that stereo information, then you create a scenario where you're trying to get the stylus to go up and down and track a long wavelength really fast, and it'll jump right out of the groove.
Matthew MacArthur is executive director of The Record Company, the first non-profit recording studio in New England. He says he's seen a recent revival of analog recording.
Along with the resurgence of vinyl, there's also in our business the resurgence of analog equipment and analog tape.
He says the mechanical limitations of analog force artists to make quicker decisions in the studio.
In the digital world, there is an endless number of tracks and editing possibilities. Pop songs that you hear on the radio may have 200 or more different channels of audio that are all playing simultaneously. Compared to, in the beginning, a 4-track tape machine where that was all you had. The early Beatles recordings were 4-track recordings. And so you didn't get to have 200 pristine, separated tracks. You ran out of options very quickly. And so by the time you got to the end of the product, you didn't have the opportunity to poke at it the way that you do now. It was finished.
Rob Jasko is the chair of the production and engineering department at Berklee College of Music. He says the limitations of vinyl and analog recording can sometimes help to boost the creative process for artists.
When you were working with an artist to produce a vinyl LP, you had a total of about 38 minutes of music to work with. That mechanical limitation greatly informed the process of choosing which songs would make 40 minutes worth of music as an artistic statement. And you really had to consider the song that started the A side and which song closed the A side and what was the listener experience when you flipped it over and began the B side. So there was a lot of creative thought that was put into both song selection and song sequencing because of the mechanical limitation of the format.
Even in an increasingly digital age, Jazzco says his students wanted to learn about analog recording so badly he had to create a special course.
As an answer to all of the interest of the skill needed to work on tape, though, we've created an elective called Analog Recording Techniques. And we offer 2 sections of analog every semester. So it's wildly popular.
Adam Clark is the drummer for the Debo Band. His band released their self-titled album on double vinyl 2 years ago. He says he enjoyed the experience, but the format was definitely a challenge to work with compared to digital.
You do have to get everything mastered in a different way, and that has a lot to do with sonically what can be on a record and what can't be on a record. A lot of times you can't just take what's on the song list on your CDs and put it on vinyl because the songs might not fit size-wise, and because we did double vinyl, there's actually a completely different song order. Some of the songs are longer than others and they just wouldn't fit, so we had to kind of rearrange the whole thing, get the songs on the sides and without having to like part 1, part 2 them, you know.
Tony Rocks is at the 40th annual New England CD and Record Expo back in March. He's an independent artist who has also released work on vinyl. He says vinyl isn't about the sound, but about a tangible connection with listeners.
Sometimes you just want to possess something as opposed to just hearing it, online. And that's the thing, when you have a physical record, you can actually grab it and, look at it and stuff like that as opposed to just downloading a song and hearing it through the headphones.
Joe Viglione was also at the expo. He's a producer who owns his own record label. He says he appreciates vinyl because it represents the age before digital music piracy. Work that he produced was illegally shared online.
This record has like 250,000 spins on YouTube, but we didn't see any of that. It was pirated. It was put up there without my authorization. And I sold my coin collection to put that out. That's how important it was to go from one collection to another. When people steal it, they don't understand it. Some guy sacrificed his coin collection to get this to the world. It's just not fair. It's not fair to the hardworking people that put out records.
Sean Quinn is a member of the Cambridge DJ group Soulaleluia that only spins vinyl 45s. He says that's a way to honor the format and give his audience a special listening experience that he worked hard to create.
It's a dedication to the culture of the way these records were made, the way these records were made to be heard. There may be a great song out there that I love and that I really want to play for you, but I can't because I don't have it. I don't physically have it. I mean, I could download it, but that kind of maybe is cheating, It's more like an Indiana Jones kind of thing where you're seeking this stuff out. You're spending your time in, dusty basements and stuff. And when you do find this record, you're going to present it in a completely different way. Whereas if you could just download it and immediately have it, there's not as much maybe satisfaction.
Finally, the experts gave their thoughts on the future of vinyl. Some weren't very confident.
The problem is you have to look at it in relativity to overall sales, and it's still just a fraction.
When considering whether or not to release something on vinyl, for me it's a business decision. And the question is it worth the investment, and is it going to produce a return? And so for me the answer is absolutely not. There'd be no reason to press to vinyl.
The most modern cutting lathes for making new vinyl plates are already 35 years old. They're not going to last forever. Parts are disappearing. They're really, really hard to maintain. I don't see any way in which I could imagine it taking off and the numbers growing.
I just think it's another tool in the toolbox. I don't think they throw out one just because you get another format. Like I said, it's just another tool. It's just another way of of hearing the music and stuff like that. So I hope they don't throw it out altogether.
Others were much more optimistic.
It seems like all of a sudden that the records, from almost going away completely, they've made a big resurgence, and I think people like having vinyl. It's a good activity that people still understand. It just never went away.
people collect stuff. People will collect anything. And if they love it, they're going to keep it forever. I don't think vinyl's going to go away.
I think it's going to live on quite some time. Is it ever going to achieve the numbers of which it did? Absolutely not. And I don't think that's the point.
It's the fun of record collecting, which is this 40th year of original New England Compact Disc and Record Expo. 40 years of vinyl collectors coming here. What does that tell you? There won't be 40 years of digital people going to computer kiosks.
I've always wanted to make a record that was like analog, straight to tape, and not go into Pro Tools and not do any ones and zeros, no digital at all, and then keep it on tape, mix it analog, and put it on vinyl. I'm gonna do it. I have to do it. I mean, it will be done.